To have transactions more efficient and fairer, we need systems that connect countries. In other words, we need interoperability. And for this reason, at the IMF, we are working hard on the concept of a global CBDC platform.
So 93% of the world's central banks are getting ready to put one of these into use by everyone. And it's highly likely that the majority of people out there, I mean, if this poll is any indication, there's a lot of people out there who have no idea what that even is. But I'm going to start at the beginning. So CBDC stands for Central Bank Digital Currency. It's a completely digital form of money that would be under the control of the government's central bank. So in the United States, that would be the Federal Reserve. And so for Americans, what that means is you would have a direct financial relationship between yourself and the Federal Reserve Bank.
Yes, of course. The Federal Reserve cured America's financial instability and monetary weakness.
It also means there would be a ledger recording every purchase, tracking and tracing every single purchase made with that CBDC. And it's not just about the obvious difference between traditional paper fiat being something you can physically hold in your hand, a physical currency, versus CBDCs being digital. Okay, a lot of money today is digital. A lot of money today is just numbers on a screen. And we've gotten to this point in society where a large portion of our interaction with those numbers on the screen is just moving them around from different places and clicking buttons so that bills will go away. Right? If not for having such a thing completely control whether or not we have a roof over our heads and food on the table and the ability to work on our documentaries, it's a weird system, okay? I mean, if you really started to think about it, if aliens from outer space came to Earth and they saw that the majority of people, the way we live is by moving digital numbers around on screens and clicking buttons in order to survive, that we have this way of doing things, I think that would be incredibly confusing. But it's not that, and it's not even that cash is anonymous while a CBDC is the exact opposite of anonymous, but that is true. But in my opinion here, the key important difference is the way in which a CBDC can be controlled versus all other financial instruments that we have had up until this point, okay? Because this money can be programmed.
The key difference with the CBDC is that the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that.
What that means is the issuer of a CBDC can, if allowed by the government, control how that money is spent by the recipient. They can put rules on it digitally in any manner of ways. It also gives third parties the ability to do that, such as payment interface providers, if they're allowed to do so by the central bank. WEF members are currently talking about using AI to give people a carbon footprint score on every single thing they buy, down to the batch number it was produced in. Supposedly to, quote, help people make different choices.
But very, very specific. This specific brand, even the specific batch of this. If we link that with, AI technology and then big data and particularly Internet of Things, there are ways for us to come up with instant measurement and reporting of the carbon footprint. I hope that through this we can help people to really make different choices.
Because I guess we're going to continue on with this myth that it's individuals making purchasing choices that's hurting the planet, and somehow it's not corporations producing environment-polluting, unrecyclable plastic garbage and making that the cheapest and most abundant option available to everyone that's doing it, right? We're just going to keep on with that myth.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker.
Stipulations and rules can be programmed into this money. That is the kind of thing I'm talking about, okay? Because they will know who you are and what exactly in every last detail down to the carbon footprint of what you purchased with this currency. And they will know it at the point of sale when you're trying to purchase it. So if, say, there was a reason to try to stop you from purchasing that they deemed to be good for the environment, say, I don't know, I'm just throwing out these crazy ideas I'm having here. It's like totally something I came up with and not something that's been written about for decades. If they wanted to do that, they could. That is what I'm saying. This is to the point that back in 2021, the Bank of England told ministers they needed to intervene on the programming of digital currency. And this was in the Telegraph. Digital cash could be programmed to ensure it is only spent on essentials, whatever that means, or goods which an employer or government deems to be sensible, again, whatever that means. The Bank of England has called on ministers to decide whether central bank digital currency should be, quote, programmable, ultimately giving the issuer control over how it is spent by the recipient. Tom Mutton, a director at the Bank of England, said during a conference on Monday that programming could become a key feature of any future central bank digital currency, in which the money would be programmed to be released only when something happened. So it puts a restriction on the future use of the money unless or if something occurs, whatever that might be. He said there could be some socially beneficial outcomes from that, preventing activity which is seen to be socially harmful in some way. But at the same time, it could be a restriction on people's freedoms, which feels like a really blasé way of putting something massive that he just said. Preventing activity which is seen to be socially harmful in some way. Could you be more vague? Right? I mean, it's 2023, guys, and what people agree on in terms of socially harmful, I would say, is a lot different, and a lot fewer things are actually agreed upon these days than maybe any other time in modern human history. You know, we got the basic social mores that most of us agree, you just don't do that because it's wrong. You know, things like murder and child abuse and stuff like that. I mean, people can generally agree on stuff like that. But when we start talking about social harms past that, it starts to become subjective extremely quickly. It depends on whose agenda and what day. Things like with the green agenda having to do with maybe, say, meat consumption. There are people who would say that is a social harm, right? There are people who are saying that if you have a child right now, that's a social harm. I mean, you could go on all day with what some people seem to think is a social harm. And it straight up says they can prevent that activity. So they can just shut that money down.
You have to force behaviors.
That is what this means. They can program it. We're sorry, Mr. Smith, your meat rations for the week have already been purchased. You cannot purchase any further until such date. That is the kind of power a CBDC has over people. So that's the Bank of England, and they're currently working on the digital pound. And on the website, from the Bank of England website on the digital pound, there's actually a set of your questions answered. And it says down here, would the Bank of England restrict what I use my digital pounds for? Neither the Bank of England nor the government would be able to program your digital pounds or restrict how you spend your money. However, you would have the ability to program your own payments if you wanted to. So the ability is there, but at the present time, they're claiming it will be in the hands of the user. However, it doesn't really jive with what they wrote in this consultation paper published 7 February 2023 called The Digital Pound, a New Form of Money for Households and Businesses, ? Where they talk about how technology is emerging that allows users to set rules to limit their spending on certain products, for example, on gambling. So they're saying they're going to let the user set a limit on spending on certain products, which means the ability is there. But you get further down in this same document, and it isn't just the user. We do not propose to develop a digital pound that enables government or central bank initiated programmable money. While it may be possible to program the digital pound so that it could only work in certain ways, so they straight say they can, this is not relevant to the Treasury and bank's policy objectives for the digital pound. However, during our research, stakeholders highlighted the potential benefits of programmability for innovation and user experience. So the Treasury and Bank is going to therefore permit payment interface providers and external service interface providers to implement such functionalities themselves. But they would require user consent. So already, this is not even here yet, and already it's not just the user. And they admitted in this paper that they've already decided it's not going to just be limited to the user. So now it's also going to be payment interface providers and external service interface providers, which would require user consent. And my question simply is that consent outright, or is that some kind of terms and conditions thing where you click an accept button and there's 8,000 pages of legalese that you never read and you don't even realize you're giving away the ability to program your money, because that's what this is going to be in the future. This is going to be the money. And you also had Christine Lagarde come out at the BIS Innovation Summit in March 2023 and say that it wouldn't be central banks doing the programming, it would be the commercial banks.
For us, the issuance of a digital currency that would be central bank money would not be programmable. Those who can associate the use of digital currency with programmability would be the intermediaries, would be the commercial banks, and that's their business.
So my question is this that thing that we've seen already where it's like a runaround of rights because it's the private company, and if the private company says it's going to be like this, then that's the way you got to do it. So if they want to tell you where you can and can't spend their money, because this, by the way, also is not considered your money. There's some pretty interesting semantic arguments going on with who actually owns a CBDC.
What we see is an effort globally to implement something called central bank digital currencies, which, according to the central bankers, will allow them to have much tighter control of individual accounts. They insist that any money in your bank account is not only, it's not your money, it's theirs. They call it their expression of central bank liability, so they think of it as theirs.
But across the pond over here in America, people don't even know what this is. There's apparently a large contingent of people who have never even heard of this. So they're about to unleash this on everyone in the not too distant future. And people don't even know what it is. And so this poll was carried out at the end of May, and they surveyed 2,000 Americans across all the spectrums of politics and education and finances and race and everything. And they found that only 16% of Americans actually support a central bank digital currency. That's pretty low. Of the 2,000 Americans that the Cato Institute polled who actually knew what a CBDC was, only 16% said they would support the government issuing one, and more than twice as many oppose it. But 49% of people had no opinion, which it says likely stems from the fact that only 28% of Americans are even familiar with what a CBDC is. That means 72% of people polled have no idea what this is, despite the fact that we're being told that in the not too distant future, this is going to be a major part of our economic lives in this country. And there are a lot of risks here inherent in this type of system. It's way different than the cash, even the digital forms of it with online banking. It's way different than that, what this is. There are a lot of risks, and those risks don't appear to outweigh the benefits to anyone. I mean, the people who understand what a CBDC is and understand the mechanism behind how this will work, they don't want it. The risks don't outweigh the benefits here. But considering the role this is about to play in our lives, people are just woefully uneducated about what this even is.
You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it as a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like say ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC.
And they're both concerned about the money being turned off, because it can. Again, it's programmable. They could even do a thing where they make it expire after a certain amount of time. You know, like a gift card, you get a gift card. Some of these stores have a thing where if you buy a gift card and you don't use it by a certain time, then they start to pull the money off of it until it goes down to zero.
It's not just about digital forms of physical currency. You can have programmability, units of central bank currency with expiry dates.
Having one of these things really does require that the people using it trust the central bank and the government. And the people who support CBDCs are people who trust the Federal Reserve, according to this poll. Trust in the Federal Reserve may determine if Americans will actually trust the CBDC. And there's not a lot of people who have trust. That's the thing. The trust they seem to need for this is severely lacking. And I thought this was very interesting. At the end of the poll, they actually went ahead and threw in another question having to do with in-home government surveillance. It says the survey also investigated Americans' comfort with the government installing surveillance cameras in every household, quote, to reduce domestic violence, abuse, or other illegal activity. Perhaps not surprisingly, only 14% of Americans support the idea, whereas 75% oppose it. I can't even believe 14% of people would want that. Government surveillance cameras just in your house. Notably, Americans who support a CBDC stood out in how they think about in-home government surveillance cameras. A majority, 53% of Americans who would support a CBDC, support the government installing in-home surveillance cameras to reduce abuse and other illegal activity. This suggests that some of the psychology behind support for a CBDC springs from an above-average comfort level with trading some personal autonomy and privacy for societal order and security. Which is a really nice way of saying the people who live in the most fear are the people who are the most willing to accept authoritarianism and tyranny. Having government surveillance cameras directly in your house, like they could ask that question a different way. Would you like to live in George Orwell's novel 1984? How much would you appreciate that world? Would you like it a whole lot or a whole lot? It's just unbelievable that anybody would accept that. The people who are most likely to be in support of this are people who are also most likely to support other things that most people would not be comfortable with, like having government surveillance cameras directly in your house. A fear-based mindset which completely enables authoritarianism and tyranny, just like we've seen in all of modern human history, and even most recently in the last few years. We do not need to be making decisions on what we're going to be doing financially based on the most frightened of everyone. That is not a good basis for how to run society. I shouldn't have to say that, but I guess I do, okay? So I'm making this video because this poll shows that we need to start talking to people about what CBDCs are and what those risks are. Why there needs to be some pushback here in terms of the potential risk of social control that is just inherent in a system like this. And even more of, I would argue, even more of a financial power imbalance than we are already living with now. And it's pretty bad now, okay?
You know, you read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility.
Because how many technologies have you ever heard of in your life where they went, yeah, sure, we could do that, but it's a really bad idea that has like a 99% chance of leading to a dystopic future outcome, so maybe let's not do that. How many? Can you count it on one hand? Is it zero?
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Once again, our financial system really has always been based upon this idea of trust. Because this is what it is. This is what a CBDC really is. It's a programmable digital currency. They can put all kinds of rules on there. They can put all kinds of limitations and stipulations and mandates and whatever they want. If they want to, they can do it. If they decide that it's a social good, they will do it. And that's the thing that people don't really like to think about when it comes to money just in general. But it has always been, in terms of the last 500 years of known financial history, money has always been a means of social and behavioral control. It's how the gears turn in this society.